Hey everyone, so we finally know the true name of Luffy's fruit. It is not the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but in fact the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika. And this was by far the best possible reveal we could have had for what Luffy's fruit actually is. When Oda introduced the idea that the Gomu Gomu no Mi that we've known and loved for 1000 chapters was in fact something totally different, it immediately spawned a million theories. None of which, to me, felt right. Not because they weren't good theories, but rather my personal preference, the idea to me that Luffy was suddenly not in fact a rubber man, that felt to me as though something that was a core part of Luffy's identity was potentially being thrown out the window very late in the game. If Luffy was not a rubber man, but rather perhaps an oil man or a resin man or Sun Wukong or Hanuman, all of these ideas did not sit right with me simply because they felt as though they were changing something fundamental about the character that did not need to be changed. However, now that we know what the fruit truly is, the Nika fruit, and what it does, all concerns are out the window, as the fruit's actual ability, Luffy's true ability, is not changing who he is or what we know him to be in any way. He is not suddenly oil, he is not suddenly Hanuman. Rather, instead of changing Luffy's identity, the Nika fruit and its abilities actually seem to double down on everything that we've already known Luffy to be. Everything that he represents, everything about his fighting style, everything about what it means to be a rubber man, both symbolically and literally, that has in fact been taken to the next level with the Nika fruit. Essentially, this fruit is the perfect reveal at a perfect point in the story, the point where Luffy is one step away from becoming the Pirate King and the man who will bring the dawn of the world, as the awakened Nika fruit essentially makes Luffy even more Luffy. It is not changing who he is, rather it is an evolution into the fully actualized version of himself. That is the key. This is not changing Luffy, it is an evolution into his true self. And so today I'm going to be breaking down everything that makes the Nika fruit such a symbolically, narratively brilliant decision by Oda, one that was very likely planned from day one. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe for more One Piece videos every week. So to begin with, I think by far the most interesting thing about the reveal of the Nika fruit, the reason it feels so right, so perfect to me, is that I don't even think that Oda initially planned this story, the story of One Piece, as Luffy the rubber man saving the world. Taking a step back and looking at the story as a whole, it feels like Oda's initial concept for Luffy was very possibly actually always this ability all along. This Nika power, this comical, cartoonish fighting style that feels like it ever so slightly even stretches reality in a way, basically a Looney Tunes-esque hero. I think that Oda actually thought of this first as the original concept, and then actually worked backwards to sort of nerf it down to just being rubber to start with, as having full-on Toonverse powers would probably be too powerful for a protagonist at the start of the series. The reason that I say this is because this ability set that the Nika fruit has, the full scope of what it is, actually fits Luffy and the underlying ideas of One Piece better than the rubber fruit did. The rubber fruit actually feels like it is more limited in how it represented Luffy up till now, which is insane to say. I never thought that I would say that the Gomu Gomu no Mi is anything less than the perfect ability for Luffy. But here's what I mean, and here's part of why I think the Nika concept possibly came first, and the rubber fruit was maybe simply the reduced version of it that Oda chose to run with for the majority of the story until the time was right. See, Oda has been asked before why he gave Luffy the rubber fruit. After all, rubber is not an ability you would normally expect the hero of a grand epic like One Piece to have, especially not a hero who is set to become the king of the seas and bring the dawn of the world. However, Oda's reasoning was that he chose rubber because it was the most ridiculous ability imaginable. He wanted there to be that underlying comedic element no matter how serious the story got, as One Piece of course gets extremely dark and heavy at its most dramatic points, but all of that can always be undercut with Luffy's inherent ridiculousness. In a way, the comedy of Luffy's fighting style and the manner in which it can inadvertently sort of break the tension even when things are absolutely dire reflects Luffy's own role in the story. No matter how terrible the problems people are facing may be, Luffy will always be this happy-go-lucky goofy hero who can come in and somehow make everything better. He can bring joy and happiness and smiles to the people of these islands who believe that all hope was lost. And so that idea had to be reflected in Luffy's fighting style. His fighting style needed to be funny. But let's hold on a second there. If that's what was first and foremost in Oda's mind, that Oda wanted to write a comical hero with the most ridiculous power, I don't think the first thing Oda was necessarily thinking of was rubber. I think it is very, very likely that his initial concept of Luffy was in fact this, a full-on cartoon man, as stated in the manga, the most ridiculous power imaginable, truly the funniest hero imaginable. I think this is what Oda has really wanted to draw Luffy as all along. Again, I think rubber was simply the necessary choice early on in the story to dial things back. If you write a hero who has such a ridiculously free-flowing, boundless power set from the start, it is very difficult to give him challenges. Not to mention, writing good fights consistently would become fairly difficult, as there wouldn't necessarily be that much progression you can write in Luffy's fighting style over 1,000 chapters if he can already do everything the Nika Fruit allows him to do. It's actually really interesting to think about, but the rubber fruit, just being a rubber man, was actually inherently a very limiting ability. Think about that. Yes, rubber can stretch and change form, but it requires effort to do so, and rubber always has to snap back. The Nika Fruit is the truly free version of the rubber fruit. It is boundless in what it can do, it can change shape freely, it can transform its environment freely. And so even if you don't think that Oda necessarily came up with the Nika Fruit concept first, and then dialed it back to just rubber to start the story, think about how elegantly it fits with Luffy's own progression throughout One Piece. Luffy from the start is meant to be the embodiment of freedom, but he is not yet truly the freest man on the seas. That is who he will eventually become, but at the beginning he is nowhere near that goal. And fittingly, Luffy has an ability that reflects freedom well, rubber. He can stretch, he can change shape, but again, it takes effort and he always has to snap back. There are limits to his stretching. As the series progresses and Luffy gets stronger and stronger and closer to his goal of becoming the freest man on the seas, we see Luffy overcoming the limits and bounds of rubber in a way. As he progresses, he continues to stretch his ability beyond what is possible. We see this commented on over and over, that he is doing more with rubber than one would think you can do with rubber. And finally, when we were at this stage where Luffy is close to becoming the freest man on the seas, he is only one step away really. Now finally Luffy reaches the fully actualized version of himself. It's as though the training weights are off. Now he is still rubber, but without the natural restrictions of rubber. He is finally truly free-flowing. He can stretch and change form on a whim effortlessly, without seemingly having to snap back if he doesn't want to. Now he truly is freedom incarnate. This is the freest fruit. This is the most free ability. The Gomu Gomu no Mi, the rubber fruit, was, funnily enough, a restriction on his freedom, providing so much freedom in so many ways, but still bound by the properties of rubber. Yet slowly, Luffy progressed over the story and pushed the capabilities of rubber to stretch beyond what seemed possible. So finally he now is able to do whatever he likes with the ability, even that which seems impossible. If he wants a giant arm, he can just have a giant arm. If he wants bigger muscles, he can just have bigger muscles. As such, this really does feel like the Luffy that Oda always wanted to draw. A man who truly has the funniest, most ridiculous power, who is freedom incarnate. The rubber Luffy we knew up till now was in fact a man pushing himself to slowly get to this point where he truly has the freest ability. And this progression of his mastery over the fruit, and continuing to push the limits of what it can do, mirrored his journey to becoming the freest man. Now that we are at a point where he is close to becoming the freest man, he rightfully has the ability that is the freest and most boundless power imaginable. I also love the fact that now that his fruit truly seems to be freedom incarnate, it parallels nicely with prior beats of the story. For example, we all know that the rubber fruit made Luffy the natural enemy of God back in Skypiea, as rubber just so happens to counter God's ability of lightning. However, in the broader scale of the world, the true gods of the story, the celestial dragons, of course represent oppression and control. That is their power. In which case, Luffy's true fruit also just happens to be freedom incarnate, the natural enemy of God and God's power yet again. And finally, I like the fact that throughout all this, it was important, it was necessary, that Luffy was just a rubber man for so much of the story, before he could become this free-flowing, toon-verse version of a rubber man. The reason being that while the Nika Fruit's true ability best embodies the ideas of freedom and bringing smiles and laughter to people, the rubber fruit, the basic Gomu Gomu no Mi, best embodies the idea of willpower. that was the most important thing the rubber fruit represented for Luffy up till now. The idea that no matter how many times he is crushed or beaten or seemingly killed, he simply could not be put down, his willpower was too strong. He would always bounce back, because rubber always bounces back. So think about before and after, what the concepts of the two fruits represent. Yes, end of story Luffy, the man who will free the world and bring joy and hope back to oppressed people. That man is best embodied by the Nika Fruit. But before that, young adventuring Luffy, the man who had to overcome challenge after challenge, adversity after adversity, to slowly climb up the mountain, that man is best embodied by the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And the best part is that these aren't two separate ideas. He is still a rubber man, of course. He was a rubber man when he set out, and he'll be a rubber man when he becomes Pirate King. It's just the evolution of his ability, going from true, simple rubber, the type that is limited in what it can do, but always bounces back no matter what you do to it, evolving into this unbound rubber version, where he can stretch however he wants and change however he wants. That evolution reflects the journey of a man who had to push himself over and over through sheer willpower to keep coming back, to keep bouncing back from failure and climbing towards freedom, till eventually he reached the summit and became the freest hero imaginable. It is Luffy's version of the koi fish that traveled up the waterfall and became a dragon. Now, of course, Luffy's story isn't quite done. He hasn't yet become Pirate King. He hasn't even defeated Kaido yet. But my point is that we are reaching that stage of the journey, that final stage, where Luffy is essentially evolving into that final version of himself. So that is all for this video. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this every week.